Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Given here, back another video. This episode, we're taking a look at the changes that are coming to Feral Druid and how Blizzard is changing them in Midnight. If you guys want to follow along, there's going to be a link in the description of the video that's going to take you out directly to this article, and you can just kind of follow along with us if you go into that link. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. So, what's the main kind of meat of this? Like, what is really changing with Feral Druid? And that comes down to one word, and that is snapshotting. Snapshotting is being changed, it's being simplified. It's still there, but it's not nearly as complicated as it used to be, which, kind of fits Blizzard's agenda with kind of pruning down some of these classes and specs. So, in my opinion, the spec is more approachable now. I think that Feral Druid was one of the harder specs to play in this game, to be honest, with the snapshotting mechanic. So, if you're not sure what snapshotting is essentially taking your character's state at any given moment and applying those buffs to the full duration of something. So in this case, it would be a bleed. For Feral, snapshotting used to be a thing, especially in like demo lock and Cataclysm. But in Feral Druids, right, that's going to be through your bleed. So what this means is you can basically take your character's power. Like your character can be extremely buffed up for just a couple seconds, and you can apply a bleed, and that entire duration of that bleed will be buffed, even though your character was only buffed for a couple of seconds. So let's say I'm buffed with 200% damage for 5 seconds, but I apply a bleed that lasts 16 seconds. Well, that entire duration of that bleed is buffed by 200%. So kind of like a simple explanation of it, but that's the idea, right? So snapshotting has changed, and most of that is going to be around blood talons. So blood talons, and most of those changes come in with our blood talons. So blood talons has been completely removed. So really what we're looking to do with blood talons is take a dot that already exists on a target and then reapply the dot with blood talons. That's going to make our rip deal 25% increased damage for the full dot duration. So instead of the dot duration being 16 seconds at 25% increased damage, now it's 25 seconds at 25% increased damage. So that whole gameplay loop is being removed with blood talons. Now snapshotting is still there. So snapshotting still exists through our Tiger's Fury. We're going to open that. So attacks deal 50% additional damage for their full duration. So really what this is saying is you want to apply your bleeds essentially when Tiger's Fury is up. We're going to get the full duration on our bleeds whenever we pop our Tiger's Fury. So if you have existing dots on the target, whenever you pop Tiger's Fury, make sure that you refresh them. Now, another thing that's really nice is the game will actually update your icons. You can see that right here if your bleeds are empowered through your Tiger's Fury. So you don't have to guess if you have a beefed up bleed essentially. If the icon's glowing, then go ahead and reapply the bleed. So that icon is going to highlight through our Tiger's Fury, and it's also going to highlight through our Prowl. Our Prowl does still buff our Rake, but these are going to be the only two abilities that snapshotting will exist through. We did skip over some stuff up here at the top, so we'll kind of loop back. So we did lose Thrash, we lost Adaptive Swarm, and then we also lose our Brutal Slash. Another thing that I forgot to mention is our Sudden Ambush loses its snapshot benefit as well. This used to make our next Rake or Shred deal damage as if it was stealth, so you could snapshot the bleed with that damage amp. You can no longer do that. Now it's just a finishing move that has a 6% chance per combo point spin to make the direct damage of your next Rake, Shred, or Swipe critically strike. We are getting a new ability here. So we did lose Brutal Slash, but it is kind of getting replaced with something called Chomp. So just read this out. Chomp your target, dealing percentage of attack power, physical damage. Chomp critical strikes, deal 3 times the normal damage. And a Chomp can only be used when you fall below 30% energy or for 2 seconds afterward. So this is kind of an incentive, right, to pull up your energy and then spend it all, because that way you get access to Chomp. I noticed that they're doing this with actually a lot of specs. They kind of did something similar with Balanced Druid. Like when you leave an Eclipse, you get like a damage amp essentially to kind of make the lows feel not quite as low. We did also get a buff to our Feral Frenzy here. So it still awards 5 combo points. Still 25 energy, still 45-second cooldown. We just had the base damage essentially buffed on it. And yeah, that's pretty much everything here in this top section. We kind of talked about the UI updates for the bleeds. We'll go ahead and move on. So 2 new talents. The first one here is going to be called Hunger for Battle. So when an enemy afflicted by your rip dies, gain 10 energy, and your damage dealt is increased by 5% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. So spread out your rips, and as those targets die, you're going to be getting basically a damage amp. So the more things that die, the stronger that you get. Almost like you're going into a frenzy sort of deal. So very cool. We also have a blood spatter, which is very similar. I'm also playing into Rip, so Ferocious Bite's damage to its primary target is increased by 2% for each enemy affected by your Rip up to 10. So really, really good for funnel damage. You can spread out your AoE bleeds and you can funnel Ferocious Bites into the highest health target. And then we also have Ashmane's Guidance, which was reworked slightly. So instead of Avatar of Ashmane being a 3-minute cooldown, it's now a 1-minute 30. Long story short with it, if you're not sure what it is, it's like an improved cat form, essentially. So your energy cost will be reduced by 25%, and you can use your Prowl while within combat, and will grant you your Berserk. So very, very, very powerful cooldown. Very nice that we're getting this on a 1.5-minute cooldown as well. Some of the stuff that we already talked about, abilities removed. We talked about Thrash being gone, Brutal Slash is gone, Adaptive Swarm is gone, and then also Berserk Frenzy. If you're not sure what that was over here on the right-hand side. So during your Avatar of Ashmane, your combo point generating abilities bleed the target for an additional 150% of their direct damage over 8 seconds. So that is getting removed. We did talk about Chomp, right? The no energy cost, and it can only be used when you fall below 30% energy. We kind of talked about the incentive behind this is to dump your energy. And then Feral Frenzy, which we briefly touched on. We did not take a look at the two new choice nodes, though. So we have Focus Frenzy here. This will reduce Feral Frenzy's cooldown by 15 seconds if you want to take that. Or you take Frantic Frenzy on a 45-second cooldown. And this is sort of like an AoE burst. So one for single target, one for AoE, essentially. And that 15-second cooldown reduction is going to make it line up with your Tiger's Fury at 30 seconds. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about our Apex talents. So if you're not sure what Apex talents are, there's a new set of talents that are going to kind of play around the core gameplay loop of a specific spec. So every spec is going to have these 3 talent little nodes here over on the left-hand side of the tree for 4 total points. So all of these are called Unseen Protector. First one here is when you Ferocious Bite, you have a 50% chance per combo point spent to flicker to an enemy within 30 yards and deliver an unseen attack. And that's one of the 2, Unseen Slash and Unseen Swipe. So slash a target, dealing physical damage and an additional bleed damage over 6 seconds. If this effect is reapplied, any remaining damage is added to the new bleed. And then Unseen Swipe, swipe nearby targets, dealing physical damage reduced beyond 5 targets. So in a way, our Ferocious Bite is kind of like an AoE spell now. So you can kind of freely funnel down that high health target, spam Ferocious Bites into them. It's going to be passively doing a whole bunch of extra AoE damage for us. Now, in the next node of Unseen Predators, Unseen Attacks increases your damage done by 8% for 5 seconds. Additional applications extend this effect. You can put 2 points of this for 16%. So even more of a reason to Ferocious Bite, because those unseen the stacking damage buff is going to go into your bleeds as well. So all those rips that we're spreading out are all going to be buffed by this Unseen Predator. All those unseen slashes that we're putting out as bleed damage, all going to get buffed by this. And then the final node here is Tiger's Fury causes you to perform an unseen attack after your next 2 combo point generating attacks. Rip and unseen attack damage is increased by 30%. So the unseen attack that's kind of automatically done for us is pretty nice. But the main part about this is the rip and the unseen attack damage is increased by 30%. So really, really strong nodes here, focusing a lot on Rip, focusing a lot on Ferocious Bite. Okay, now let's quickly talk about our hero talent. So we have Druid of the Claw and we have Wildstalker. Let's just talk about Wildstalker first. So the new nodes are going to be over here on the right-hand side on all these trees. So first one's going to be Green Thumb. So the rate at which Bloodseeker Vines grow is increased by 20%. We have a bursting growth under that. So when Bloodseeker Vines expire or you use Ferocious Bite on the target, they explode in thorns, dealing a percentage of attack power, physical damage to nearby enemies. So again, more of a reason to use Ferocious Bite. And then finally, when Symbiotics Blooms expire or you cast Rejuvenation on their target, flowers grow around their target, healing them and up to 3 nearby allies for spell power. And then finally at the very bottom, we have a Rampancy. So Bloodseeker Vines have a 20% chance to trigger bursting growth every 2 seconds at 100% effectiveness. So, just more bursting growth essentially. So basically, long story short, you're growing these vines on targets as you attack. As you Ferocious Bite into them, they will explode, dealing a bunch of damage. So let's go ahead and go into our Druid of the Claw now. So starting on the right-hand side of the tree, we have Limb from Limb. So your auto attacks are 30% more likely to make your next Ferocious Bite become a Ravage. Ravage just basically turns our Ferocious Bite into like an AoE swipe, but a very beefed up AoE strike. It's very strong in Mythic Plus. Directly below that, we have Ruthless Aggression and Killing Strikes or Ruthless Aggression. Ravage increases your auto attack speed by 35% for 6 seconds. And then Killing Strikes Ravage increases your agility by 8% and the armor granted by Iron Fur by 20% for 8 seconds. Your first Tiger's Fury after entering combat makes your next Ferocious Bite become Ravage, so you can kind of get a really big burst window with a Tiger's Fury into a big Ravage. And then finally down here at the bottom, we have Twin Claw. So you have a 60% chance to follow up any single target melee ability with a Twin Claw, dealing attack power, physical damage, and generating 3 energy. So Druid of Claw is a little bit more energy starved than Wild Stalker, so that energy bonus just kind of helps even things out between the two trees. We also have Exacerbating Runes. So your Dreadful Wounds increase the damage afflicted enemies take from your bleed damage of time effects by 8%. So any mobs that have Dreadful Wounds on them, which is directly above, this is just a bleed effect that comes from our Ravage, are going to take 8% more damage, which makes sense. This kind of helps the tree keep linked to bleeds and spreading out those rips. Yeah, so, overall, in a nutshell, I think this video is getting kind of long. We'll just probably wrap it up here. That's the overall changes. A lot of the stuff is subject to tuning and whatnot between now and when Midnight's actually released. So I don't want to talk about like what's strongest at the moment. That could change at the flip of a switch. So really just want to kind of keep these conversations tuned down to what has changed, how the gameplay feels, and if we think the spec is as a whole holistically moving in the right direction. To me, I think that this is a win for Feral Druid. I think for most specs so far, it's been a win in terms of the changes that I've reviewed. I think going simpler is probably the direction that Blizzard needs to go. WoW is a very complicated game. If they want to expand the audience, it's just going to have to get simplified. It does kind of stink, to be honest, for a lot of veterans who have put a lot of time into mastering their specs. It feels like they're taking things away from us. But if we're talking long-term and the health of WoW, and opening this up to a wider audience and extending the longevity of WoW, I do think that these changes are probably warranted. Anyways, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Are you happy with the direction of Feral Druid or any spec, to be honest? If you'd like to see me review another spec outside of Feral Druid, put it in the comments below and I'll try to take a look at it. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one.